Hey everyone, welcome to Lauren DeLaguna. I have a really exciting guest with us today. His name is Richard Cooper. We are going to be discussing a recent tweet spiral that happened. So basically, Pearl was tweeting about parental rights as she always does, and this led to one of the hosts from whatever podcast named Chase. He reposted it and tagged tagged Richard and asked Richard for his opinion on the law, and he has given us 6 ideas of how he wants family reform to help make it so that men and women have a fair time in society, being equal in all regards. And so we're just going to go through that. Before we do, I just want to say thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate it. We're doing a lot. We're going live on a lot of different platforms today. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitch, we're on X. I don't know if my Kick is working, but we're trying to do a lot of different streams today. So thank you so much. I know it's been a while since I've been here, so thank you all for coming back. And yes, I am live. I know it's been a minute, but I got all new equipment, so I plan on doing this significantly more regularly now that I have this set up. But without further ado, let's bring on the guest of honor. Hey, Richard, how are you? Hi. So how's your day going?
It is going wonderful. Thank you for asking.
Wonderful. Okay. So before we get into this specific tweet, can you just tell me about how a woman should act? Not necessarily a wife, but a woman who wants to be a wife. How should she move about life in her 18 to 20s?
How a woman should behave if she wants to get married.
Yes, for instance, should she be
what's your target? So maybe we should start with what the goal is. What does the guy look like that you want to marry?
Let's assume a woman just wants to have the best possible candidates available to her to have offspring. So someone who is financially well off, someone who is stereotypical handsome, somebody who is comes from a good family, doesn't have a history, like a criminal history.
Okay. So, you basically want the guy that every other girl wants.
Right.
Okay. Well, there's 2 kinds of guys. There's guys that are sort of sleepwalking through life that just, are drunk on the Kool-Aid of culture and what's gotten us to where we're at today. And there's the kind of guys that follow my content, which are unplugged, that have read my book and read my podcasts listen to my podcast and all that stuff. So are we talking about the guy that's sleepwalking through life or the guy that I talk to?
Let's take both approaches. Let's start with the guy who's sleepwalking through life, and then let's end with the unplugged man.
Sure. So he doesn't really care. He just wants a girl that likes him and touches his pee-pee, and she's available when he texts her and makes an advance on her. There's not a lot of prerequisites that most guys use to select a wife today. The prerequisite is she likes me and she responds to me when I reach out to her, and she's attractive enough and she's sexually intimate with me. So they don't set very many boundaries. I think there's a lot of women out there that have some baggage and some problems, and there's some pretty terrific women too, right? It's just that culture and society has sort of polluted the minds of modern young women today, and they try to be like men. They'll go and get degrees. They'll climb corporate ladders. Hear me out for a sec. They'll climb corporate ladders. They'll be as promiscuous as men will be, because that's the narrative that they've been told, right? You go girl, right? You need a man like a fish needs a bicycle sort of thing. So you have to be selective. And the guys that I'm talking to that are, have read my book and have followed my podcast and all that sort of stuff, they usually compare women up to the 21 red flags in that chapter of my book. They'll look for desirable traits, women that are more agreeable and willing to enter his frame and be a compliment to his life, and they're very respectful. So it's a bit of a longer conversation, but those would be the main things.
Okay. So these are the things that a woman has to do in order has to not be on the 21 red flags list in order to get with a man who's not sleepwalking through life. But a guy who's sleepwalking through life, he'll take basically any woman who will touch his pee-pee.
Pretty much.
Okay. But if it were true that a guy who's sleepwalking through life but makes good money, is handsome, is one of like the top candidates for guys but happens to be sleepwalking through life, there's still a lot of women trying to get those top tier guys. So he's still able to be selective, or no? You're saying that he's not able to be selective in his woman and he'll just take any woman.
Yeah, most plug-in guys aren't that selective. Their selection process usually boils down to availability. I think the easiest way to distill it is that men generally prioritize availability and women prioritize the best that they can get.
Okay, so if any woman could get this guy, then what? If any woman could get these top tier guys, then what's the benefit to changing as a woman?
Well, that's the problem that exists today is there's no benefit to women changing and becoming better versions of themselves and maintaining their purity and being chaste when they get married, sort of thing. So you don't see a lot of good options for most guys today. That's why you've got this new movement of these guys calling for passport bros and moving to other countries to find more agreeable women that aren't drunk on the culture's Kool-Aid today.
Okay. So if you, for these 21 red flags that men have to watch out for if they're unplugged and they're top tier guy and they're looking for the correct type of woman, would a red flag be like pursuing career over family?
Yeah, I would say so. Because I mean, if you want to have a family, it's very difficult to climb a corporate ladder, get degrees, make a whole ton of money, and have useful contributing kids to society. I don't get the notion of putting a woman into the workforce to go and make some money, 80, 90, $100,000 a year, whatever it might happen to be, to contribute to the household, and then just drop the kids off at a daycare center. And the money at the end of the month is pretty much a wash, or they bank an extra grand or two or something like that. It doesn't make sense to let the state or daycare center raise your children when it's far better off for the kids and for the family involved to be doing it themselves.
Okay, that's fair. But couldn't a man stay home as well?
That happens, but these men aren't very desirable to women. They generally lose interest in a guy that isn't doing something with his life and is a stay-at-home mom, or sorry, stay-at-home dad. It's funny. I was just having lunch, and a friend of mine was telling me about his cousin that just got divorced, and she's a power chick. She's a boss girl, climbed the corporate ladder, makes great money. Guy was a stay-at-home parent, and she got destroyed in family court, right? Because she was the breadwinner. So it's not that men are getting destroyed in court. To be a little bit more clear, it's the one that earns more money that usually gets punished in the family law courts. At the end of the day, so she's
Yeah,
paying
that is,
alimony, she's paying child support. She's pretty pissed off about all of that.
yeah, I mean, that is fair because that's something that I noticed you were saying that like we should abolish alimony because women should be able to support themselves, but alimony goes both directions, even though
Yeah.
typically it goes man to woman because typically the man earns more, but in situations where the woman earns more, it goes the other way. So if the ideal woman is not really pursuing a career, not in the workforce, so these top tier men, who should they be pursuing? Should they be pursuing women who are just jobless? What should these women really be doing with their lives when in pursuit of trying to create a good future for themselves and hopefully get married at some point?
There's no real perfect answer to any of this, Lauren, for being honest. Like if you put yourself in a scenario where you treat and date on an equal level, okay, so you're equals at the same level or so, making roughly the same amount of money, what generally ends up happening is they're in the workforce, the kids are in the daycare or in the state school system. You lose control and child rearing abilities because they're talking about all kinds of things in the school system now. They're letting men dressing up as women read to children. They're talking about pronouns. They're telling Billy if he doesn't feel like being called Billy, he can call himself Sally. there's all kinds of things that the school system are starting to do that's, I think, harming the integrity or the fabric of families. And then you could say, well, okay, fine. So let's keep her home, right? Let's make her a stay-at-home mom. That's another option too. But if there's a lot of consumption of modern pop culture and the narratives that they're selling, I see a lot of guys at some point, 7 to 10, 15 years down the road, get destroyed in family court because he thought he was doing the right thing and kept her home, and she was a stay-at-home mom and she raised the kids and she took care of the extracurriculars. And then one day she got bored and decided, I think I'm going to untie the knot. And he goes through the divorce ringer and finds out what happens to men. So there's no real quick and easy answer. Like, I can't give you a clearly defined, this is what men should do and this is what women should do. I think that there's certain things that both parties should do, which will improve the dynamic of relationships. Because I'm not about separating men and women. I think men and women are better together than they are apart. But I think that we need to subscribe to traditional sort of natural roles that are in our DNA, where men do the blue jobs and women do the pink jobs. And it's okay that men do the blue jobs, and it's okay that women do the pink jobs, and we work together collectively to make something of ourselves. And if you want a family and kids, that's great too. You just have to make sure that you put together some insurance policies so that you're not inviting chaos into your life, i.e., not inviting a woman to your life with a whole bunch of red flags. Lots of guys marry women with loads of red flags. It's not that you can't. Lots of dudes do. It's just that they don't always have the best experience, and the chances or the probabilities of them having a terrible outcome are considerably higher, I think.
Okay. Do you believe that women initiate divorce typically like vindictively? Because I do find it interesting the way that you phrased it. Like when you were talking about your friend's divorce, you said, "Oh, she just one day got bored and left."
Mhm.
Do you think that it's typical for women to use divorce as like a weapon as opposed to a means of navigating their life as
Mhm.
effectively as they can for themselves and their children?
I think they initially have that approach to it. It's just that family law isn't particularly friendly to fathers, and it also, the way that it's designed, it's incentivized to make women behave badly. Women are incentivized to be the custodial parent because they get child support, and it's not child support for the child's needs. It's child support based on government tables that outline what they're going to send over to the custodial parent.
Right.
As
Can
an
I pause
example.
you there though? What are those government outlines, those grids? What are those not based off the child's needs though?
No, no, they're not. I'll give you an example. I talked about it in one of the chapters of my book. I had a friend that got divorced, and he figured he was spending something like $800 a month for extracurriculars, like taught swimming classes and daycare and meals and stuff like that. And when he got to the child support component of his divorce, the lawyers punched his income into a table, which spit out, I don't know, $3,800 a month. And he quickly learned what a lot of guys learn when they get divorced, that it's not based on the child's needs. It's based on what the government tells you you're going to be paying her. So
Well,
that extra few $1,000s goes in her pockets, and she's buying new handbags with it.
do you not believe that? Okay, hold up. Do you not believe that the child's well-being includes maintaining some relative normalcy in their life, and therefore going from one standard of living to a drastically different standard of living would not be in the child's best needs,
No, it's
like best
absolutely,
interest?
yeah, it's absolutely in the child's best interest to have their needs taken care of. But child
Not just
support's
their
for the
basic
child.
needs, but not just their basic. Well, what I'm saying is the reason that they do that calculation where they take in the man's income
Yeah.
and then they have an output is because the idea is the man and the woman, the mother and father, at one point lived together, and the child was living at a certain class, like a certain way of life, a certain means, a certain
Hmm.
standard of living that they have grown accustomed to.
Hmm.
When the parents divorce, and I noticed this stat is in your book, well, half of it, that when the parents get divorced, the incomes go down
I'm
it's
pleased you
for
read my
women.
book. That's an interesting. Cool.
41% of their income goes down 41%, and for men, it's only 23%. So so the child's standard of living is going to go down, and then it's also going to separate the wealth, so it's going to go down even more. So in order to prevent the mother from being in poverty and the child from going from um like, I'm trying to say, wealthy to
No, I
middle
get what you're
class
saying.
to
Yeah.
poverty, you know what I mean?
No, I get what you're saying, and there's some
So
merit to that. But let's take an
right.
exaggerated example, right? So let's take somebody that's very wealthy, an athlete, a rapper, or something like that, because you see them in the media, right? And so taking a more exaggerated approach to it, these guys will often find themselves in a position where they're paying child support in the amounts of tens of thousands of dollars a month, 20, 30, 40,
Mhm.
$50,000 a month. There's no world that exists where a child's needs require that kind of money, for their
No, the
basic
point being
living.
is, if
No, I get it.
the point
But
is if
if
the
there's a
rapper
slight
and the
difference, yeah,
okay.
I'm just taking a more exaggerated approach to sort of
No, but I
amplify
want
it.
to I want to use
So
that
maybe
example.
it's
If the
not
rapper
$3,800. Yes. So maybe it's not $3,800. Maybe it's not $750. Maybe there has to be a little bit more that's added to it. But $3,800 is absurd when the original cost to take care of the child when they were married was like 750. Let's just call it under $1,000. It's
it's
enrichment
not
in the
just
mother's
taking
pocket.
care it's not just taking care of the child's like
Got
basic
it.
needs, such as like
Yeah.
their food and their
But it's not an
clothing. It's
extra
also taking
$2,800 more. It's not an extra
It
$2,800 more.
absolutely could be, because
No.
if the mother cannot afford, for instance, an apartment, if she
So
would have
here's
to
the problem
move
with
in
that
with
argument.
a family
No, I get the
member.
argument. No, I get the argument. But I mean, here's the problem with it though, is if that enrichment exists so that she can get the extra money, she's of course going to try to fight for custody so that she can get that extra money, right? So what's in a child's best interest is to have good access to both parents. So if the child's best interest is to have, seeing mom and dad on an equal basis, let's just call it 50-50, right? Then she's not going to get that extra money. That's why women often push for custody of the kids, because they're looking for the extra cash that comes with the child support tables.
I think that's a very harsh way. I'm sure
It
there
might
are.
be, but I think it's gone a little bit too far in that direction of craziness.
I am not denying that parents absolutely abuse the family court system and
Yeah.
use it as a weapon. But to say that the majority of these instances of women wanting sole custody or majority custody is due to the fact that they want this maybe typically like $300 extra a month. I find that hard to believe, especially because it probably would cost more in most of these situations. It would probably cost more to rear the kid than they're actually making on these on these child support incomes. And furthermore, didn't your book also note that many of these women don't actually end up receiving the child support payments in the first place? So knowing that
No, you
especially
got that
with a lot of
wrong.
these,
If there's child support being paid from the mother to the father, he rarely gets the money.
and you're saying from
Men
the
are men
father,
are men are much more likely to pay support payments to the other parent than
do you
women
know the
are.
percentages for
I
each?
I don't know the exact percentages. No,
Okay. All right.
it's in Dr. Warren Farrell's book, The Myth of Male Power. The other thing that I was going to say too, which I left out when we were talking about this point of child support earlier, is that this guy that I was talking about, where the cost to take care of his kid ended up being $750 or so when they were together, and then it went up to about $3,800. They were earning about the same amount of money. So he was earning about 160,000. She was earning about 152,000. So let's just call it the same amount of money, right? So why does she need an extra $2,800 a month if she's earning roughly the same amount of money as him? You see what I'm saying here? Like when you look at the specifics of it, I get your argument. Like, let's make sure the kids are looked after. But if she's making about the same amount of money and she can get an extra $2,800 by having custody of the kids one extra day every 2 weeks, because that's all that it broke down to, then that's enriching her unfairly, and it's incentivizing the mother to go for custody so that she can get that free cash.
I mean, I would be very curious to see the breakdown, because a lot of times when you factor into the child support, you're also factoring in things like health insurance that one parent is paying for the other,
There's no
and so
health
that's
insurance
added.
in Canada to pay for.
So I would have to see the breakdown. We could argue and we could look at different breakdowns and we can go state by state and we can look at the breakdowns in each state and, determine whether or not we think that's fair. But I also feel like the examples that you're pointing out are the extreme elite.
That's pretty common, actually.
Aren't the majority of these custody cases not like within just like middle class and like the lower class societies?
Look, the husband and wife in most scenarios don't have a big income disparity. It's not that common today like it was 20, 30 years ago. Like a lot of these laws were created. Sorry?
It's right now, based off the same stat where the 4123 came from, I looked online and there's another stat, and the difference between the average couple's wealth is a man makes 69% more than his average wife.
Okay. In what region is that?
I believe these were United States statistics.
From what dates?
I believe 2017. Sorry? Which is the same where your other stats came from.
Okay, yeah, so 2017 is pretty recent, but that's not what I'm seeing, right? Like I'm seeing guys and gals that are making roughly the same amount of money, and when they split, she's incentivized to have the kids, not just to control and determine, where the kids go, what medical procedures are going to happen, whether or not she wants to hyphenate the last name later on in life. Like these are all control mechanisms that also exist beyond just the child support enrichment, which she's again incentivized to have the kids. Again, it's just one extra day over the course of 2 weeks, and she can get an extra $2,800.
Wouldn't he also then be incentivized? Both parents are incentivized to have the kid. Correct. Then more.
Yeah. So but the guy rarely pushes for it. She's the one that always pushes for it because she knows about the enrichment of it.
So men are just completely unaware of the enrichment?
Yeah. Most guys are not prepared for divorce. They don't understand what they're up against, whereas I think women prepare more, which is why you're seeing them initiate more divorces than men. Like girls have a committee. Like you have a committee. Lauren sits down with the girls at brunch. You guys talk about what's going on in your lives. You run ideas up against each other and you sort of talk things through. I think women spend a lot more time planning when they untie the knot. So they're a lot better prepared and they understand what mechanisms are in place that are beneficial to them. I'm not saying that they do this in like a maniacal way, like they're trying to destroy men, but you can't deny that there is a lot of strong incentives for women to behave badly during the course of a divorce, right?
I think there's incentives. I disagree with that statement. And I think there's incentives to behave poorly or well, men or women in court. But that being said, I think that's besides the issue. I find it interesting that you're saying women are more prepared for court than men when it comes to family law because they chit chat with their girlies at brunch. But wouldn't you say that men tend to have more access to attorneys? And because they have more access to finances, and often even in family law, they have to pay for their attorneys for their spouse.
Yeah.
So that's that weird.
Again, men don't take much of a preparation when it comes to untying the knot, and they're not generally the ones untying the knot. It's like 8 out of 10 times women want to get out.
I actually want to talk about that stat. So that 80-20 split stat. So that stat is actually about the initiation of like the filing of paperwork. Okay. But so for instance, if a man wanted to just abandon his family and he stopped paying for the mortgage, he stopped paying for food, the only way that the woman would be able to start, receiving alimony or receiving child support would be if she initiated the process for divorce and began that process. In the meantime, if she doesn't initiate it, then he's off to gallivant, do whatever he wants, and it doesn't affect him negatively. And this is why you see the fact that women's hands are often forced, and that's a huge drive in that 80-20 split.
Yeah, I don't buy that narrative.
I don't know what you mean you don't buy that narrative, because it's not necessarily, because the 80-20 split doesn't mean that 80% of the time it's women who are leaving the relationship. It's quite frequently men who are leaving the relationship, but women who have to initiate the paperwork, because as we both admit, women are the ones who tend to benefit from alimony and child support.
No, I don't buy that at all. Women are the ones that are leaving marriages more than men. Men will endure. Men will tolerate sexless marriages, right? Like the number one search guys are making when they're married, if they're unhappy, is how do I get my wife to bang me, right? So they'll stay in a sexless marriage for a long, long time. Women, not so much. You know, when they're ready to get out and they have their conversation with the girls and they're like, okay, girl, you know, you can do this. You can go, girl. Then it's very easy for women to start the process and finish the process and do well with the process. The only like it's very important. I think for parents when they have conversations with their daughters is don't marry a loser, because all you have to do is marry a guy that's not a loser, and you'll be taken care of if something bad happens in that marriage and you have to untie the knot.
This is true, but that's kind of what I was getting at earlier when I was asking how should a woman act, how should she be,
Right.
and then it's very difficult because you understand as a young girl, maybe 18 years old or early 20s, um, you're probably going to have a very difficult time actually choosing the best partner for you. You're probably going to be attracted to some pretty
Some
not
bad
so
boys.
great characters.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So, wouldn't it be very difficult to have a society in which it seems like this, red pill and you are pushing, in which women are pure and stay pure, and then when they're young and like fertile, and then that's when they get married to this one guy, and they stay together in marriage, and she's a homemaker and everything's perfect in this like
Mhm.
fantasy world that we're all building
I'm
when
not building that, but
um
okay.
okay, then how do you want how would society function best for you? What's your ideal situation for a woman's path to move down? Is she supposed to get married around
Well,
what
I'm not
age?
an advocate of marriage. You've got my book, so I have a chapter in there about why smart men don't marry today.
So you would say that men shouldn't get married ever.
I don't think it's a good deal for men. No,
And how many times have you previously been married?
once,
Okay. How long were you married for?
a few years.
Um, what we don't have to go into details about the individual, but like what made you want to get married?
I was doing what everybody else was doing, right? You know, sleepwalking through life. I was, it's time to get married. It's time to have kids. You know, marriage is what everybody does. She's pushing for marriage because it's safe and secure and it's good for her. So I mean, like, one does as one's told, sort of thing through life. So these are the plugged in guys that sort of follow the narrative. But I break down in that chapter in my book why smart men don't marry anymore. I'm not saying don't have a family. I'm not saying don't deal with women. I'm saying don't invite the state into your life and into your house to decide what happens to your wealth and access to your kids.
And I do understand that position. I'm not like a huge like yay the state government, government me harder. Like I'm not really like that.
Government me harder.
But
Okay.
but at the same token, you mentioned your fiance or whatever, your ex, she felt better with you doing it. And you could imagine the majority of women would feel more secure in becoming the homemaker for somebody, knowing that they have some sort of security blanket, somebody
Mm,
to back them up later, the government, in case things go south and she needs support in raising the family that she created for this man
okay.
and now do you get what I'm saying?
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
So if women feel the need to have a marriage in order to have that security blanket, and you're encouraging men not to choose women who want that security, aren't you encouraging men to weed out a good portion of women who um, would probably be quite beneficial to their lives?
Well, it's always beneficial to a woman's life if she marries up to a successful guy. Absolutely. There's no question about that. But how beneficial is it to a man that wifes up a woman? I mean, most modern women today, by the time they get married, it's in their late 20s, 28, 29, I think is the average number, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe you know the stat better than I do. Most guys are in their 30s by the time they get married now. And they're ending up with women that spent their 20s partying, sharing their bodies with dozens of men, making bad choices. And they have the biological clock, the urge is calling upon them to settle down and have a family. So they look for a guy that's willing to do that. And they often settle for what's usually not their first choice. have that family, and then the stat, what is it, 7, 8 years later, they usually have to untie the knot, and the ones that stay together, they're generally not happy.
What makes you think that the ones that stay together are generally not happy?
There's a study done by Aaron and Acetovo. I'm probably pronouncing the name wrong. I quoted it in my book, where they dealt with couples after, I think it was 8.3 years on average, and the percentage of people that expressed still being in a state of love was less than 12%. The percentage of people that still express being in a state of like obsession, like a state of bliss, was less than 3%. So people aren't reporting happiness in a marriage. And in fact, one of the arguments that I often present, guys always say to me, well, I got a great relationship with my girlfriend. Everything's wonderful. We have a good time, but she keeps pushing me for marriage, Rich, and I don't want to get married. What do I say? My answer to that is point to her family and friends and then ask her to provide an example with somebody that has a wonderful marriage, that's still in a state of bliss. They're in love with each other. She's respectful to him. He takes care of her, does all the blue job sort of stuff. And it doesn't really exist, right? Like
Well,
marriage as
I
a
just looked
institution and as a solution to our sexual problems doesn't really work that well. It kind of sucks.
I just looked up percent of people who love their spouse, and it says in a new national survey of married Americans, 40% of those who'd been married at least 10 years say they've remained very intensely in love with their partner.
Compare that
So,
to the study that I just quoted you. I don't have it here on my desk, but I printed it out and filed it away somewhere. But it's mentioned in my book. You can look it up.
um, I, okay, and I would just I find those types of stats too. Also, like even though I just relied on it as well because I'm comparing statistics, I do
Mhm.
find like happiness statistics very difficult data to rely on. But like the 80-20 split things and things like this that are more
How many
concrete.
how many people do you know that are in a state of love that are married right now? Ask your chat. Sorry, I've
Many.
got a full screen here. So chat that's watching live right now. How many people do you know that are married currently and have been so for more than 8 years, are in a state of love? Offer us a percentage, from your own experience
Yeah.
watching them interact. I'd
Well,
love
I
to
would say
hear what
that
they have
my
to say.
parents, I would say, okay, chat, I'd love to hear your responses and I'll bring some up if I see any. Um, I know my parents are married and they love each other. I
Hmm.
know family members. I know plenty of people who are married and in love. I come from like I don't know, like I don't yeah, I think it's not that uncommon. I know like my grandparents got married and stayed in love for a very long time until death. And um, my my grandma married one man and then he died and she was in love with him till death. And then she married another man and when he died, she was in love with him till death. And my other grandma as well. So like I know plenty of couples. Like in fact, I could think of more couples who are married and in love than married and got divorced. I could think of a couple who got.
Well, I want whatever your friends and family are drinking and eating, and wherever
Um,
it is that they live.
I've been married for 9 years, and we're doing great as far as I know. Okay.
Awesome.
I don't think it has to do with marriage. Just the length of time being together, it gets harder to keep passion. Yeah, it could be tricky, but then also sometimes like you go through rough patches. I'd imagine like 30 years together might be different than 40 years together, which
How old are you?
it just changes. How old
How
am
old are you?
I?
Yeah.
I'm not young. I'm 30.
Okay. So, I mean, as you get older and you take a look at, so if I go through my Facebook friends list, which I really hate Facebook, but if I were to do this right now and I would take a look at every single person that I know intimately well, right? Like I've either uh, been at their house, we've done vacations together, we've been at a business forum or something like that, and I know their life intimately well. The vast majority of them that are in a long-term relationship aren't in a blissful long-term relationship. If they're married, they're generally stuck in it, right? And there's constant conflict, or they're doing the happy wife, happy life thing, or jumping through hoops try to make her happy. The vast majority of couples, as I look around in my life, in the people that I know, aren't happily married in a state of bliss. There's disrespect from her to him. If you were to ask him, it's funny because I was driving once. I was helping some family move, and there was about five of us in the car. And the question came up: what would you do if you won $10 million? And you know what the married guy said? I'd get divorced. I'd leave. So I'm not saying this to sort of shit on, the Disney idea. Sure, it exists from time to time, but I think the vast majority of people that stay together over long term and live together under the same household on a consistent basis, they're not in a state of bliss at all.
Okay. I mean, I think like not to like call out my parents or anything, but like looking back at my parents' marriage, the only marriage that I got to really sit through and like observe,
Mm-hmm.
um, there were definitely long periods of time where I feel like I'm sure both of them felt stuck and it wasn't a fun period. But now they're in a period of retirement and it's been very great and they're very happy. And I'm sure there are many periods in which my dad, if he
If
got 10
marriage is
million,
so
or my
great,
mom,
why do 50% of them end?
I think there's a lot of reason why marriages end that don't necessarily mean that they don't have a lot of benefits. I think that we have created issues like within our laws, making it maybe possibly too easy to get divorced.
Mm-hmm.
I think that covenant marriage could be a good idea to
What's your
contract
definition
into.
of a covenant marriage?
I'm not particularly religious, but
Mm.
the idea is that it's a marriage under God and it cannot be broken unless there is legitimate reason that even the church would recognize
Okay.
as marriage that God would be
But
okay.
that's how most marriages begin, right? Under the covenant of God, where they take vows in sickness and health and richer and poorer till death do us part, blah, 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 right? But they still untie the knot. So I don't think that the Christ pill is the solution to any of this. It doesn't seem to work either.
Well, I mean, the reason that it's not just a Christ pill under the law, a covenant marriage is significantly more difficult to get out of. You can't just say, I've won a divorce. You have to prove
When I
cause
got
for a
married,
divorce.
the priest said there's no divorce.
Right. Right. So for Catholics, like my family, for instance, half of us are Jewish, half of us are Catholic.
Mm.
And my dad's side, somebody wanted to get a divorce from another person, and the priest wouldn't allow it. And so, even though legally they would be allowed to get a divorce, they wouldn't be allowed to in their community, and therefore they
Yeah, I
didn't get
understand
a
the church
divorce.
doesn't endorse it. Yeah, of course.
But if you put the church above the state, like if that's in your belief system, that God above all else, then
Sure.
that would matter to you more than you wouldn't get a divorce. And so if people were
No,
really
I
like,
understand that. And I think, putting good values ahead of shitty state values is a great idea. But the problem is that women reserve the right to change their mind at any given time. Women take vows to, again, love and to hold, richer, poorer, sickness and health, blah, 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 at the time of marriage in front of the church, in front of family, in front of God. And we'll untie the knot 7 years down the road and be like, I'm done. I can't do
but
this. To,
under
to
covenant
often perfectly good men.
under covenant marriage, under the law, they wouldn't be allowed to unless they had like legitimate reasons, such as
Yeah.
abuse
And they can
or
be
such
God
as
fearing women, at the time as well. And they still untie the knot.
how they wouldn't be like, how can you untie the knot if you're not allowed to under the
Family
law?
law, you just get divorced.
But what I'm saying is there's certain measures
No, I
within
got
the
it. But she just
law.
changes her mind. She just says, I don't want to be here. So it doesn't matter what the church says. I already had brunch with my girls and I'm ready to get out.
Right. What I'm saying is there's something called a covenant marriage that's
Yeah.
recognized by the law, and it comes from the idea of a marriage within the church, recognized by the state. And the idea is even if these people want to get out of the legally binding marriage, they wouldn't be able to without a legitimate reason, such as abuse or abandonment or
Sure. So they'll just
what
make up
have
the
you.
reason. He abused me. He was mean to me. He financially
That
restricted
yes.
me. He cheated on me, whatever, right? Like they'll just make up a reason to untie the knot. If she wants to get out, she'll get out, right? Like there's no amount of layers of protection that can be contracted out of family law screwing up your life.
Okay, so I understand where you're coming from on all this. I don't disagree with you 100%. I don't agree with you 100%, but I do want to go into some
I
of
know
your
the
ideas.
lawyer in you agrees with me, but the woman in you doesn't. I get it.
No, it's more like, um, I see how the law does unfairly prejudice men. That being said, I also see why the laws were written the way that they were in order to protect
Protect
women
women and
based off
children.
our
Yeah.
history.
Mhm.
Not, women and children based off our history.
Yeah.
And so the
It went a
main
little too
point of
far though.
family
Like, would
law,
you agree with that?
I think the pendulum could swing. And yeah, I would say I think possibly the pendulum has swung too far in favor of women. And we should absolutely be doing what we can to make it equal
It's
for
actually
men and women and put
it's actually
children
swung in
on those.
favor of the person that wants to play the victim in the equation. So that could also be a man as well. Like we talked earlier about that conversation I had at lunch where
Well,
the guy's
bitch boy.
cousin got screwed. Bitch boy, sure.
Yeah. Okay.
What does that mean, bitch
So
boy?
like the man that wants to play the victim, like a little bitch boy.
Sure. But I mean, women do it all the time. Is it bitch girl? We don't have the
No, she's
same
just a
sort of,
bitch.
you know,
That's what it's called, a bitch.
I
Like, what
mean,
are you talking about? You
we
don't call a
don't
bitch
generally
girl.
disparage women like that when they want to get divorced, but when guys, benefit in the divorce, then it's bitch boy, right? You see the
No, if you're
difference
just
there.
gonna call a man like a guy playing the victim, it's like a little
Yeah.
bitch boy. Okay,
I don't disagree with
so
you, but sure.
I'm not a huge fan of like playing the victim. It's not like my favorite. It's not a
Yeah.
good role to play. Okay, so number one, abolish alimony. Completely abolish it. How? Okay, if we abolish alimony, how do we convince what, like in the ideal red pill world, we would have, and even what you said, it is ideal for women to stay at home and raise the babies so that the state is not raising our babies for us. So
Yeah.
how do we convince women to raise our babies if there's no alimony in case if their husband decides to leave them or cheat or whatever? I know you're saying it's only 80 or 20% of the time that would ever happen. But let's say they're part of the 20%. How do you convince a woman to sacrifice all of her potential wages or potential education in
Well,
order
that's why
to
I said
create a
further
family
down
for
that
a
there should be
man?
some exceptions if she's a stay-at-home mom.
Okay. So exceptions for stay-at-home mom, but isn't alimony already based on the ability to support oneself? So like if she's a stay-at-home mom with a part-time job, should she not, like, let's say she works at Starbucks on the weekends,
Mm-hmm.
she technically has a job. So is she abolished from alimony?
Like it's there's a lot of intricacies to many of these conversations. Like this isn't a puzzle with 4 pieces. This is a puzzle with tens of thousands of pieces, and there's moving parts to it. So I can't give you cut and dry answers. The point of that tweet was, of course, to draw some attention to many of the problems that exist and some potential solutions which would improve and encourage men to want to sign up for marriage. But marriage today in its current state, like you've got these strong, independent, boss girls today that don't need no man, got their careers, they got their jobs and all that sort of stuff. You live in the state of California?
No, I live in Florida.
Florida, okay. I thought you were
Yeah.
California for some reason, but like in certain states, there's alimony for lifetime if you've been married after a certain period of time. There's been lots of stories out there where women have stayed for that extra
Is
year or
it?
two. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's California still, but there's several states where there's lifetime alimony for a certain investment in that marriage. Um, Paying for somebody that is able-bodied and can work into perpetuity is just absolutely absurd. And none of these women are encouraged to go and get a job if they can sit at home collecting $20,000 a month in alimony. It's
Looks
just
like
the reality
Florida
of the
just
world.
ended that.
Yeah.
Florida ended, and I'm trying to like research lifetime alimony.
I'm pretty sure
Uh,
California is one of those states. You can look it up. But there's several places in the world where you're stuck with lifetime alimony, and that's not encouraging women again to get back into the workforce and stand on their own 2 feet. If you're so strong and independent today, ladies, you shouldn't need alimony, right?
well, I mean, it's once again, alimony is calculated based off not only the man's wealth, but also the woman's wealth, and
Like I
then
said, there are
trying to
exceptions
prevent.
if she's going to be a stay-at-home mom.
Right, but even if she's not a stay-at-home mom, if she is like a low wage worker who was only working for like a slight supplemental income, and was still, and now she's on her
It's
own.
basically a stay-at-home mom. Like if she's working at Starbucks on the weekend, she's basically a stay-at-home mom.
I just feel like a lot. Okay, I would be really curious to see, like, if we were to break down like, go into a specific state, look at how, like, maybe we could pull up a specific state and look at their alimony breakdown and see if you think it's fair. Like, can you name a state?
No, because I'm not familiar with state by state laws. I'm just talking broadly when I talk about these conversations.
You thought California was unfair?
I think California is one of the states where it's lifetime alimony after 10 years. Yeah.
Let's see. No, that is not true. It's Connecticut, Florida, which Ron DeSantis just repealed that, but it was Connecticut, Florida, New Jersey, North Carolina, Oregon, Vermont, and West Virginia.
Right. So those are not good states to live in for guys. If you're going to be married, just to be
clear. Mostly liberal states. Yeah. Okay. That would not, I understand why you would be against lifetime alimony, but you do admit lifetime alimony only kicks in after, like, what, 20 plus years of marriage, right?
Could be 10 years, could be 20 years. It all depends on the state, but I would definitely not put myself in a scenario where I could be exposed to paying alimony for the rest of my life.
Rest of her life.
Tomato, tomato.
Okay. I understand that. I do understand that. The reason that they have, like, the idea of, I would, okay, let's go into one of these states. Let's go into the Connecticut requirements, lifetime alimony.
While you're doing that research, I'm just going to grab a drink. I'll be right back, okay?
Yeah, okay. Alrighty, I'm going to try to share the screen with you guys. And we'll do this, actually. Present, share screen. Okay, cool. Okay, Connecticut law does not set durational limits, but requires a court to specify a basis for an indefinite or lifetime alimony in both states with certain limitations. Okay. A lot of the times you'll see, like, a specific number of years, like, you'll see a chart says, oh, here we go. This is what I was looking for. Okay, yeah, so I thought it was longer than 20. Yeah, so this is the only time in which you could receive lifetime alimony.
Which state is that in?
I'm looking up Connecticut right now. Oh, it says Massachusetts, though. But I've looked, alimony payments and durations in Connecticut and Massachusetts. Okay. This is Massachusetts, which I find odd because it doesn't list Massachusetts as one of the states that allows for.
Do you think an able-bodied parent that might have been staying at home, doesn't matter if it's man or woman, should be collecting alimony if they can work?
Well, that's a lot of the times the factor. So, like, let me take a quick super chat. Most women today work full time and most kids are in daycare. Day one, Florida changed the forever alimony law. They also have default 50-50 custody. Shout out to Brother Rich, leading from the front. Nice. Thank you so much. Okay. Sorry, could you repeat your question?
Do you think that a able-bodied parent, again, whether it's male or female, it shouldn't matter, should be able to mooch off the other parent and collect alimony when they can get into the workforce and earn a decent living?
Isn't that one? I feel like that's a lot of the times one of the factors of determining whether or not alimony is due is whether or not they're able-bodied and capable of caring for themselves.
Well, I mean, the vast majority of complaints that you'll hear from the parent that is paying alimony is the other person can work. Why am I paying to maintain their lifestyle when they should be in the workforce? I'm not married to them. Like, what's this about?
Yeah, it's one of the many factors. So, like, if the person is healthy, that is, like you see here, that is one of the factors that is weighed in. It's actually one of the primary factors that is weighed in.
Yeah, but you know as well as I do, it's very easy to go to a doctor and say, oh, I have anxiety issues, I can't work.
Yeah, you could say that. That being said, when it comes to the law, you're supposed to have experts from, like, if she brings in an expert, then you're more than welcome to bring in an expert as well.
Yeah, but the point that I'm making is you shouldn't need to have to play that silly game, right? You're an able-bodied person. You can go out there and be a grown-ass adult and go and make some money. You don't need to mooch off my bank account anymore. We're not together. I don't need to look after you.
Um,
Like, why do we have to jump through all of these hoops to prove that the other person's a lazy piece of shit? That's what I'm saying, right? Like,
yeah, it's not so much that it's not so much the whole point of alimony is just to make it so that the person um can survive, and like that it would be bad for society to let somebody who, like, let's say a man married a woman and took care of all of her finances and everything, and she was taken care of for like only 3 or 4 years, and then they got a divorce and she had, no money, no income, no nothing. Do you think I think she should get alimony at least for a couple of months, right? Put her on her feet and then
sure, a couple
out.
months, no problem.
Okay, but that's
But
how the
but
system
for
is set
life or
up.
for 5 or 10 years, come
No, the
on.
life is only for people who've been married for 20 plus years, and the judge doesn't have to give that. It has many factors that it
Okay,
has
let's
to
go to
look
story
at.
time. Let's go to story time. So,
Okay.
I have a friend that runs a business, does very, very well. His kids all live with him. He owned multiple houses. His ex wife is in possession of two of the houses right now. One of them is a giant 7,000 square foot house. He's renting a townhouse because he's broke as shit fighting the lawsuit, the whole family law stuff. Again, the kids are with him. He's paying her $30,000 a month in maintenance, alimony, whatever it is that you want to call it, to maintain her lifestyle because she's claiming that she can't work and that she still needs his money.
Okay, so she's claiming that she can't work on what basis?
Doesn't matter.
Like,
Sprained
well,
her eye looking at a disco ball.
it's very
The cat needs
difficult because
medicine like 3 times a day.
it's
Whatever
very
story
difficult.
happens to be manufactured. She's got an anxiety about COVID going into the workforce, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. The point being that if somebody doesn't want to work, if they can benefit by earning a large chunk of change by sitting at home on their ass, they will sit at home on their ass given the choice, right? Like that's the
Yeah.
problem with family law is it doesn't incentivize adults to be adults. It encourages somebody to become a victim because there's enrichment in that victimhood, right? So, I mean, you can slice it any way you want. It's just not a reasonable thing to be paying alimony into decades of lifetime after you part ways. Like grow the hell up and go get
I mean,
a job.
so judges, as of right now, and I've definitely seen this imposed before, judges can absolutely say, like, if, for instance, I have a law degree, I mean, I'm not a licensed attorney, but I could get a job. But let's say I was working at a law firm, I was making decent money, I was making like $70,000 a year, and then I quit to work at Starbucks or somewhere where I'm making like $20,000 a year, maybe $30,000 a year. The judge would be able to say, you're purposely living below your means. You're purposely not making the income you could make, and therefore I'm going to reduce the alimony and based off the income you could be making. And
Yeah,
I
to which you
absolutely
would probably argue something that would be some bullshit story about why you can't and why you would stay home. Here, here's my psychologist letter saying that I've got a diagnosed anxiety disorder that's preventing me from going to work. Like,
okay, I have a question.
I get what you're saying.
Do you
But
not believe anxiety
there's too
or
many
disorders?
problems inviting the state into your home, too many variables, fighting things that you shouldn't have to fight.
I agree that you should avoid getting the state in your home in the first place. You avoid getting the state in your home in the first place, you could just not get married, which has been your solution. Or if you are going to get married, definitely don't get divorced. And if you're going to have kids, make sure you don't have any issues with the baby mama or the baby daddy, because otherwise the state's going to get involved. But I forgot where I was going with that. Okay, let's just move on to
Number two.
Yeah. So
Default
you want to
50-50 custody.
Yeah,
Isn't
I
that
do
reasonable?
actually I do like that.
A lot of
I
states have
have,
that already, right? Florida, Kentucky, Michigan, California, I think is another one.
yes, I do like that. Um,
Like, why should you have to
and
fight
I
for custody of your kids? But in most places in the West, you still have to fight for custody. You still have to fight to get 50-50, which is absurd.
and I have pushed, I've on different debate panels have pushed for 50-50 presumption as well.
Yeah.
Just playing devil's advocate.
With the exception that one parent is a total piece of shit. Like if she's a prostitute, he's a drug dealer and moving cocaine, from Colombia, then there's probably an argument to say, look, I don't think it's in the child's best interest to be with that parent. Then you could argue that. But I think it should be a default 50-50 structure.
That's essentially what I was gonna say. I was just gonna say, like, playing devil's advocate, I have heard there is this there's this woman, I forget exactly what happened, but it was like her grandchild or her child. The other parent took the baby and abused it, and there was default 50-50, and the court was so always trying to give both parents the benefit of the doubt, so as to not be the state that deprives the parents of their,
Mhm.
constitutional right to parenthood. But the problem with that as well is if we're putting the rights of the parents first, then we're not putting the rights of the child first. So we do agree. I think I would agree with you on default 50-50, so long as that presumption is second to the rights of the child, like the
I
benefit.
I think by default the courts generally put the interests of the children ahead of the parents.
Yes, they do, but it's also difficult sometimes when you're looking at the statute and you're going in order and you're just following. So if you go default 50-50, if that's your first step, then you might not, you might come to a different outcome than had you started with the interest of the child and looked at, uh, okay, in the best interest of the child, we definitely can't have the dad have sole custody, or even or mother have alone time with the child. And then you look at the 50-50. It's like, okay, well, we would have assumed 50-50, but I think just having a different starting point could result in different outcomes. But I think we're basically on the same point.
Okay.
3, harsh penalty for false DV. Isn't that already against the law?
No.
You don't think lying to the police is against the law?
Yeah, lying is against the law, but women get away with it routinely. And there's nothing that's ever been done about it.
Well, I mean, people get away with all sorts of crimes routinely. And there have been
No, but this is a
cases.
particularly heinous crime. Like the reason why women do it is to remove the man from the household. Often the locks will be changed on the house and he doesn't have access to the matrimonial assets, aka the house or his kids. And making up a story or hammering your hip to create bruises, right, is not something that women should get away with. And I'm not just saying women, but it's women that do this. It's not generally men that can do this because the law laughs at men when they say, "Oh, I was raped by her," right?
Mhm.
So using domestic violence as a tool to gain higher ground in the divorce needs to come with harsher penalties. There's too many incentives for women to lie and to make up shit. And it comes at the guy's cost and expense, which is not cool.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think there already are harsh penalties, but it's just
Yeah, but they never
very,
exercise them.
very
They
right. What
never
I was going to say is
exercise them.
extremely difficult to prove. These not only domestic violence cases are hard to prove, but then false domestic violence cases are also hard to prove. And then also getting the state to want to continue on a case that probably failed in the DV case because of he said, she said. So then to continue on with a further case, it's very difficult to convince a DA, okay, I know you were just prosecuting the boyfriend for DV, but now
Yeah.
can you drop everything and prosecute your witness for lying to you? It's just, but yeah, we absolutely should, as a society, consider false reporting of crime to be exceedingly egregious and put, I believe some states, I'm not sure, I'm going to have to double check on this, but I'm pretty sure some states, can't you be punished for the length of the crime, like of the person that you were going to accuse?
No,
Like, so
women
for
women
instance,
routinely get away with murder when it comes to domestic violence. It's a very powerful tool. It's the whole, like Amber Heard said it, nobody's going to believe you because you're a man, right? It's very easy for women to allege anything they want to get the guy removed from the house, especially during a divorce, whether it's acrimonious or not. And it is very highly beneficial for her to do that. Story time. A friend of mine's getting divorced. He's getting divorced because his wife cheated on him. Okay, they're having a dispute while they're untying the knot. He gets mad, points his finger at her, and says, "You're a fucking liar." She calls the cops, accuses him of domestic violence. He gets hauled away in cuffs, spends the night in jail, has the locks changed on the house, and the process to untie the remaining of the knot becomes that much more complex, right? False DV is a serious issue that is highly problematic, only for men, not for women. This is a one-way street. The incentive to lie and the punishment for lying needs to be improved. And
um,
this is something that nobody contemplates when they're getting married. They only contemplate this when they're dealing with the problem directly, or they know somebody that's a family member or a loved one that's dealt with it directly. So it sucks, but it just exists. It's just a reality of what happens out there.
um, okay. I mean, I briefly worked as a public defender on a limited license, and
Mm-hmm.
I did see DV cases in which I represented women who were accused in DV cases that I thought were BS.
Okay.
So I it does
What,
go
like
both
lesbian
ways.
couples?
No, no,
Okay.
no.
Because I've
It
never heard of
wasn't.
a woman alleging, or sorry, a man alleging domestic violence to his wife.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I've definitely represented women before.
I've never
Absolutely.
heard of that in my entire life. The law typically
Okay.
laughs at guys like that. They're like, "Come on, really?" She's like 5'2",
No.
125 pounds, soaking wet. Like, really?
Well, not only does the law not laugh at them, there's a lot of DV doesn't require, especially in the state that I worked in. I was working in Arizona, and they have
Mm-hmm.
very interesting DV laws where screaming at someone, screaming at a roommate could be considered domestic violence.
Okay,
So, yeah. So if
that's
I've
absurd too.
right, yeah, I somewhat thought that. I mean, yes, yes, it has to be egregious, but yes. Um, but women absolutely got accused of that and were accused of DV, and or I had several cases like that. So it does go both ways, just like we mentioned earlier. The alimony goes both ways, but it's typically one way over the other. I don't know how exactly to change the law. You're saying harsher penalties, but it's already not being enforced. So then I guess you could argue the only thing that you could really ask for is to have a prosecutor who's more eager to prosecute these, right? So isn't that just in your
Or
voting power?
or you could just not get married and completely avoid this chaos entirely.
But in terms of you and I changing society, right? If we're trying to benefit society
I
for the
don't.
benefit of everybody,
If I'm
then
going to be perfectly honest with you, Lauren, I don't think that we're going to fix society in one call here, chopping up
sure.
ideas together like this. Like I said, this isn't a puzzle with 4 or 5 pieces. This is a puzzle with tens of thousands of pieces, and they're constantly moving parts. So the fact that it exists in a man's life, like you're no longer in charge of your life when you get married. You have the state in control of your life, and a woman can do anything that she wants later on down the road when she changes her mind about you to really invite a tremendous amount of chaos and havoc in your life that can destroy your wealth and the access to your kids, which is why I tell guys, you've got to be insane to want to get married under these conditions. It is not a good deal.
I understand where you're coming from. We do have a comment that says survey false accusation rates range against men at 10 to 15%, and women are like 6 to 8%. So there's still a difference, but it does go both ways.
Okay.
It does go both ways. Okay, let's go into divorce should be a 90-day process. Like I wouldn't be against making it a faster
It
process.
should be a simple process because right now they can tie up huge amounts of financial resources through acrimony. Like family law is insanely lucrative. It is one of the most lucrative areas of law that are practiced. Um, Lawyers should not be able to benefit over a couple fighting over things over such a prolonged period of time.
Well, I mean, sometimes things need to get worked. Like sometimes you have just contention and things need to get worked out, and it takes you a
I know, but
long
a lot of
time.
the contention could be resolved by abolishing alimony, getting rid of 50-50 or fighting for custody and making it a default 50-50 custody. You know, removing the incentive to file a false domestic violence charge. A lot of the above items that we talked about would make it a simpler process. I'm not saying, you know, it's got to be 90 days, but speed the frickin' process up. Like,
Yeah.
to create that much friction between two parents while the children are often still young watching it all unfold, it's not good for the kids. If the courts actually gave a shit about kids like they say they do, they would make it a faster process to make sure that the one, parents are able to maintain their wealth and not give it away to lawyers, and two, it doesn't traumatize and disturb, you know, the children's lifestyle as they're growing up. Because kids watching their parents fight has got to suck.
Oh, absolutely. Watching I mean, that's also a reason why divorce should be simple to allow. Yeah, absolutely. It should be.
So we're in agreement on that one.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement to that one. The only thing I would say is that I think the reason why it's taking so long in the first place isn't so much because we want it to take long, but we have this really packed court system. We just have
Yeah.
a totally overrun, overburdened court system.
Because there's too many laws, because the government's too involved in people's lives.
And I'm not necessarily against that idea either. Maybe it's kind of difficult because we have just as society expands, then the more interactions that people have with one another, and therefore the more rights and rules that we have regarding interactions with one another, which creates more laws, which creates more statism.
Yep.
And that's just like nature of a growing organism such as the government and society. But I don't really know how to resolve like the bloating of our judicial system, especially in family law.
Well,
So,
you know, again, the points that I made earlier would help remedy and lighten the load, but we're not getting less laws in our lives as time goes on. We're getting more laws and more government involvement and meddling in our lives, in our bank accounts, in our pockets, and how we raise our own children and stuff like that. So I don't see the system improving or lightening anytime soon.
yeah, very true. Okay, and then abolish division of assets. Um, how does that work though? What if you're married for like, what if you get married at like 18?
Mhm.
You're married for like 30 years. How do you not? You're absolutely going to have joint assets. Who's going to get those joint assets? How do you abolish?
Yeah, I think there's going to have to be some carve outs. And like I mentioned at the bottom, slight exceptions are needed if there's a stay at home mom type of role. But take a, I don't know, 3 or 4 year marriage where, you know, she comes in the marriage without a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. He ends up buying a house. He ends up furnishing it. He ends up paying for everything. He ends up building a fantastic business. Um, you know, he ends up doing all these. Like, you should come with what you, sorry, you
What
should
was she
leave with what
doing
you showed up with.
while he was buying a house and doing
Who
this and doing
cares?
that? Was she?
She could have been working at Starbucks. She could have been working at the nail salon. She could
But
be at
what if
the
she was
receptionist
taking
desk.
care of his children? Like,
That's why I
okay,
said
you're
there should
saying
be some
staying at home,
acceptance
mom.
if there's a stay-at-home mom. But I think there's too much enrichment for women in divorces where they've got their job, they've got their career, and all this. Like, I've seen lots of cases where they've only been married for a short period of time, and she's making $50,000 a year. He's making $250,000. He buys a house. He buys a car. He's paying the car lease. He's doing all of these things, and it's like, if you untie the knot and her standard of living goes from down here to up here, you're no longer together. Why does she get to maintain and enjoy that standard of living if she's no longer with that guy? It's goodbye. Go back to where you were before and take what you had and go home.
Alimony is about the standard of living. Division of assets is a bit different. Division of assets is about the property that you accumulate while you're together.
Yeah. If I buy the house, then why do you get half of it?
Because
If we've only been married for 3 years.
you're working as a couple at that point.
No, that's bullshit.
And so
that's bullshit, and you know
ways,
that's bullshit. If I spend $2 million on a house and I pay for the house and you're making $40,000 a year working at reception at the insurance company, why do you get half that house?
Because as
Because what? Because
the
you made
concept is,
sacrifices?
no, the concept is as a wife, you're there supporting the husband in order to make
No,
it so
no,
that
no.
he's
There's
capable of
no amount of
working.
support that could be argued that is worth half a $2 million house. Like if
It's not usually half either. Like
if
there's a
you're
lot
on
of,
sometimes it's more, Lauren. There are places in the world
Mhm.
where women actually get more than half, like Australia.
Okay, but in from what I've seen, I would like to see the chart breakdown and the mathematical division of assets breakdown but from the ones I've seen, it's usually based off the factors are the length of the marriage,
Yeah.
how much each individual contributed to the workingness of the relationship. So for the example you gave, chick works at Starbucks and gets her
In
nails
most
painted and her
places in
hair
the
done,
world,
she
in
might
most
only
places
get
in the world,
10%
it's
of the
division
marital
of
asset.
assets. Sell the house or give her half the value or give her half the appraised value. That's generally how it works. You can avoid that to some degree if you marry a woman of the same socioeconomic standard, like she brings to the table what you bring to the table. You can avoid it to some degree if you have a prenup and a postnup, but those tend to lose value over time, or if they're not written properly, there could be all kinds of ways to poke holes in that. It just doesn't make sense for a high net worth guy to invite into his house, into his life, the state and a woman that makes a lot less. If she decides to leave later on down the road, she can take half of his shit. So I don't see any argument that changes that. And there's been lots of women that have been on the brunt end of that stick as well, where they were the income earner or the breadwinner, and she learns that she has to give half her shit to him, and they
You
lose
can't,
their ever
it's not
loving
half of
minds.
your
Halle
shit. It's
Berry,
half of
for
the shit
example.
that you acquired during your marriage. It's not half the shit that you had like pre the marriage. So if you were
Tomato,
already
tomato. It of course depends
no,
on where you're at,
it's not tomato tomato, because if you're exceedingly
but it
wealthy
is.
prior to the marriage and then during the marriage you just accumulate some wealth, then you're only splitting the wealth that you
Again,
accumulated during the marriage.
it depends on where you live. There's many places in the world where you could be married for 3 or 4 years and take half of his shit.
Oh, like where?
Canada, for example.
Okay, Canada.
The common law is 2 years in Canada. So after 2 years, you're considered married, even if you don't marry at all. And then there's division of assets at that point. There's actually a really interesting piece of case law. I can't remember the gal's name, but the guy that was involved is a billionaire. He was like the 20th richest guy in Canada. Very, very interesting case. They were together for 10 years. They never lived together. They both had kids from prior marriages. They would have dinner routinely. The mistake that he made was that he held out to the public that he lived in a way that looked like marriage. So he would take her on vacations, let's say 4 out of 7 days per week, take her down to Florida, take her up to Muskoka, pay for all the stuff. There was lots of pictures on social media of them together with big hearts in the sand, RC plus whatever. There was a diamond ring given to her, even though he didn't officially make any statement of proposal or setting of a wedding date. But they never lived together. And because he held out to the public that he lived in a way that looked like marriage to the state, he was forced to pay a substantial chunk. I think it was $40,000 a month or something like that. He's paying a huge amount of money monthly to her, even though that he didn't live with her. So there's inherent risk that the state creates for you if you start not even getting married, but if you start acting like you are married. So this is why most lawyers today that have been dealing in family law. I know a couple of guys in this space.
Common law marriage is only in a few states, though, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's only in a few places, but that's why you get these lawyers that are like, look, just don't live with her. Don't get married, and don't hold out to the public that you are in a state that could be interpreted as marriage. Make sure she maintains her own residence. She has all of her utilities in her name. She's got no utilities in her name at your house. Spend time together, hang out, have a good time sort of thing. But don't live together. Like, don't show off to the world that you're living in a state that looks like marriage, because that's where it gets very, very complicated for men. So That's why I'm saying, like, hey, have kids, spend time with a woman, but just don't do it in such a way that invites the state into your life to complicate it. Because then you have to make all of these adjustments and all these points with alimony, custody, DV, the process taking so long and being so expensive, dealing with the assets. All of these things are unnecessarily complex.
Yeah, true. Very true. Okay, and let's talk about the last one. Adjust child support for the child's actual needs. I think we already discussed that
Yeah,
one a
that ties into
little.
the first one with child support.
Oh, yeah, sorry, my camera's need to get a new plug. But we also talked about this one a little bit, where the child's needs, in my opinion, include the ability for the mother to be able to maintain a standard of living for the house, so that could go up to the thousands of dollars without that being insane. So, like, for instance, the rappers that you were talking about with their baby mamas. Baby mama has a very low standard of living before she becomes rapper's girlfriend. Rapper and girlfriend live together, and baby's living in penthouses, life of luxury. Rapper and girlfriend break up. Should the girlfriend have to move back in with her family and then have the baby move in with the family in like maybe a low class area, or should the father have to maintain the lifestyle that the baby is accustomed to, which would mean keeping the mother at least in her own apartment, and that would be where that amount of alimony, or at least child support, is significantly higher for someone like a rapper.
I'm not arguing that the child needs to be looked after. The child absolutely needs to be cared for. It's important. It's your offspring. Why the hell would you want to abandon that? But not to the point where she's buying new handbags with the money that you're giving her, right? Where she's driving a Mercedes and you're driving a Kia, sort of thing. That's where the unjust enrichment comes in, and it's not one thing. Like I said, there's multiple pieces to this puzzle, and as you sort of stack them up, the odds are just stacked against you as a guy, and it's unfortunate because the notion of marriage is sweet, it's romantic, it's what we've been told to seek out, through our childhood with everything that we've consumed. But the unfortunate reality of it, like the cold hard truth of it all, is that that's not how it unfolds in most situations. And generally speaking, it's the guy that's left screwed at the end of it, not the gal. All she has to do, like I said, is not marry a loser.
Yeah, that is true. It's just very it is difficult when you're saying don't marry a loser, but also get married young, because you're not going to be desirable if you're in your 30s and you're not a virgin, and you don't like.
Well, for being honest, all of that doesn't really matter to the
Red
vast
flag.
majority of men. The vast majority of men don't care if you're 20, 30, or 40. The vast majority of men don't really care if you're a virgin or if you've slept with 100 guys. They're, like I said earlier on, they're mostly plugged in, sleepwalking through life, not being that concerned about things that are important. We have 40-year-old, women creating OnlyFans, bringing in, $100,000 a month. Simps exist everywhere. They're always out there. It's just that I think that the older that women get, the less they get of what they want. And for women, from a woman's perspective, her best approach, if they want the life that every chick basically wants at the end of the day, which is a family and kids, is to do it young, not run through her 20s with a bunch of other guys and partying and all that sort of stuff. Maintain her purity and her value, and just marry a successful guy that's not a loser.
Right. So marrying that successful guy, keeping your femininity, not going into the workforce, not necessarily trying to be like an excellent, educated, academic person, be more of like a home giver, take care of the home and stuff. But then you also go through all of these things where we're swinging the pendulum back. So
Yeah.
it just seems a bit scary, the idea. And I know that you made a lot of exceptions for stay-at-home moms, but once again, I do think that these laws already do have a lot of those exceptions into place. And I think it would be interesting to break down like one of the states.
Fight through, Lauren. Like, they're too hard to fight through, and it's a massive waste of time and resources to counter The bullshit. The amount of time and effort to counter lies is exponentially higher, than the lies themselves. So it's just like I'm in agreement that men and women are better together than they are apart. It's just we live in a pretty messed up time right now where there's so many factors pushing against that for most guys, especially guys in my category, it's better not to get married or to live with a woman. And that's just a reality of what it is.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate your opinion, and thank you so much for spending time here. Can you plug us your stuff and tell
Yeah, you can
us
just go to the website.
where
It's
we
just in
can?
the just to richcooper.ca. You can find my book, my YouTube channel, my podcast, my courses, all the good stuff's over there.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Richard. I really appreciate it, and I'll talk to you later.
Awesome.
All righty. Okay, y'all. Thanks for joining. Thanks for being here. I know it's been a minute, and love seeing y'all. Glad to have this new setup. Glad to see your beautiful faces. I want to give a special shout out to the 2 people who gave super chat. So thank you, DL Saint, and thank you, Michael. I really appreciate that. You guys are great. And yeah, wish you a great day. Mwah. And I'm going to start streaming way more often now that I have this set up. So leave a comment below about like what you want to see. I just filmed yesterday. I just need to get it edited. I just filmed yesterday a video about a man who is suing 27 women for alleging online that he was dating all of them at the same time. He's also suing Facebook and he's suing other people. But the story has a crazy twist to it. It's an ongoing lawsuit, so we're going to be following that as well. Also following the Karen Reed and all the Turtle Boy stuff. So thank you guys for being here, and I hope you have a good day. Bye.